Hello, everyone. So it is Friday, April 4th. Is that right? Yeah. 2025, it is 11:15 session. Do all of you have one of the Stations of the Cross booklets? Good. What I'd like to do is to continue with Good Friday a little bit. And this is a little gift to you. And I'd like to tell the story about what this is and about my role in it and how it came to be. Because what I'd like to do is to entrust your prayer to the healing of around the issues of clergy sexual abuse in the church. So it's a present for you. So I would like to kind of walk through it a little bit. So this was, so just before the shutdown and COVID of 2020, I was approached by Liturgical Press. One of the editors was a friend of mine who asked me to illustrate this version of the Stations of the Cross in atonement for the healing of the sexual abuse issues of clergy in the church. And so this was January, February before the shutdown. And I turned it down 3 times. And finally, John Kyler, who was the editor of this, said, "Rab, would you just get over yourself and do this?" And I finally said, okay, all right. Now, the interesting thing is, this text was written by Father Paul Turner, who is a great liturgist in the church and has written dozens and dozens of books on liturgy. And this version of the Stations of the Cross was commissioned by the American bishops for this. He is, in fact, he still is, I believe, the rector of the cathedral in the Diocese of Kansas City, and his bishop at the time was on the board about sexual abuse, and so they commissioned Paul Turner to write this text. That text then was prayed throughout the Diocese of Kansas City in Lent of, I believe, 2019. So it was ready to go for Liturgical Press to do something with it. They wanted to print it and get it out there. Now, I believe still this is the only prayer resource we have in the church that prays with the issues of sexual violence among the clergy. You would think by now there would be lots of resources, and there aren't. So, in my conversations with the editor in February of 2020, I very reluctantly went out and started to buy materials. It was interesting that first of all, I just started painting in 2014. And I've got lots of time. I'm going to tell you the story about how I got into painting. So I had just become pastor in 2013, and there was, our novitiate is nearby in Colorado Springs, up the mountain in Cascade, and there was a woman who had helped our novices with painting and art and all that kind of stuff for a dozen years or so. So in I think it was 2013, 14, she came to me and she said, you know, there's a really big class this year and I don't have room in my home. I need space in the parish. Could you provide space? And so, you know, I was a new pastor, and, you know, to give space, if anybody has ever worked in a parish, to give space away it's a delicate situation, to say the least. So I said, oh, sure. You can have this room. And the staff was not pleased with me at all. But I said, oh, what the heck, you know. I said, I can give you space and you can do this here under one condition. And she just looked at me and said, what? And I said, well, I want to do it too. She goes, okay. So she set up and she got the room all ready. And after a couple of weeks went by, and she finally, on a Friday morning, she said, I'm ready for you. I've been trying to think about how I am going to approach you with this art thing because I don't want you to be disappointed. So here's what happened. She took me in this room and she had it all set up. She had two pieces of paper, large pieces of paper on the wall. She had some water, some black acrylic paint, and a brush. And she said to me, she goes, well, first of all, she knew that I was really grieving, leaving that parish where I was serving the poor, and then having to come and be a pastor in this other place. She knew I was grieving a lot. So she says to me, she gets me in that room. She stands over by the two pieces of paper. I'm sitting in a chair. And she says to me, I want you to describe one of the people that you miss. And I'm going, okay. So I described Joan, who was my age. She had been horribly abused as a child. She had tight curly hair, thick glasses, and was a janitor. So Lisa picks up the brush, dips it in water, some black acrylic paint, goes over to the one piece of paper and goes like this. And there was Joan on that paper. So she says, what I want you to do, I want you to do it. And she said, I want you to describe somebody else. And I want you to do it. I go, okay. So I described Steve, who lived outside in Portland in a tent in the woods. He was received into the church. That Easter vigil, of course, he came just soaking wet because he lives outside in Portland. And, but he always sat in the last pew with his arms over the pew and his head down and a baseball cap on. He too had been abused and couldn't keep a job, and yet he was an incredibly beautiful soul. So I picked up the brush, I dipped it in some water, some black acrylic paint. I went over to the piece of paper and I just went like this, and there was Steve. And I stood back from Joan and from Steve and wept my eyes out. I just wept and wept. And Lisa, the art teacher, said to me, "See, it's all inside of you. All you have to do is do it." So from that moment on, I just started doing it. And she had developed some classes in the parish with that new space. And so at one point she had up to 70 people in the parish in art classes because I was so excited about it. So she literally used to have to come and just pull on my sleeve to get me to stop because she had to go, you know. I go, okay. So anyway, so that was the beginning of my art lesson. That was my art lesson. And the rest of it was just gravy after that, you know. And I used to say to her, "Don't you tell me what colors to use or how to do it." I said, "I'm too old for that. I'll use any gosh darn color that I want to." I actually didn't say it that way. And I said, I just let me go. And she goes, "Okay." So anyway, one of the novices in that first year class, of course, he and I became good friends, and he left the community and then went on to be an editor at Liturgical Press. That was one of the guys that asked me to do it because he had known what I was doing. So one of the things was, I said, the reason I kept saying no is that I know what Liturgical Press prints, and it's not what I do. And he used to say to me all the time, he goes, "I know that, but this is different. We've never done anything like this abuse thing. I want something different." I go, "Okay." So I went out and I bought some supplies. Now here's the interesting thing. In the course of those couple of years, you know, parishioners would give me gift cards to Hobby Lobby, and, you know, and there was a really fancy art store there that I never went to because it was so expensive, but they would give me gift cards to that place. So that was the place I was going to get my supplies for this. Now, the interesting thing was, it was a very snowy day, and I think the schools were even shut down, and I went in there was nobody else in there, and I just started gathering art supplies, and I put everything on the counter, and I pulled out my pocket, and I had some gift cards, and some of them were really already several years old, and the guy at the counter was kind of surprised that they were that old. And so he gets everything and adds everything up and blah, 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 blah. And the total came to $400. I had exactly $400 in the gift card to pay it. So I knew that there was something going on here that was beyond me. So I bring everything home and get everything ready. And, you know, I mean, I was a pastor, for heaven's sakes. How much time could I possibly spend on this? So I get everything ready, and I was so excited, really. And I thought, okay, so this was the day that I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll just play around a little bit. I'll just play around. So I put one of the art panels up and on an easel, and I got my new paints out and all that silly kind of fun. So I had a copy of the text. So they had sent me, you know, so I printed out the copy of the text, and I've been praying with it, and so I got the text out, and I'm starting to just play. Now, I'm not really thinking that what I'm going to do here was the version I was going to keep, but I was just playing. So anyway, so I get my stuff out and I start painting. And all of a sudden, I don't know why here, but my easel is right here, by the way. I don't know why that is right now, but that's where the easel is. So, so I get everything ready, and I'm just kind of playing. And all of a sudden, I look at what I had done, and I started crying like you would not believe. Because what dawned on me just in that very first one is that I was trying to control the image. And I thought, that's the last thing the church needs, is for me to try to control the image of this healing when the church has been trying to control the image of all this all along. I cannot do that. It was like I was being run over by a bulldozer. It was such an insight for me. So I go, holy crap. So I put everything away for a couple of days. I came back and I said, okay, I'm going to just start playing with this a little in a different way. So I got my easel up again, it's right here. And, all my paint's ready and blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, here's the day. I'm going to just try this again. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just needed to give myself permission just to play before I got down to business of what I was really going to do. So I took my hands and I dipped them in paint, not a brush, just my hands, and started using my hands to put color on a canvas. It didn't matter what color it was, I just grabbed whatever color I wanted, because I'm too old to have somebody tell me what color to use. So I just put color on canvas. And I stood back. And once again, I started weeping. Because all of a sudden, this time, I saw the eyes of Jesus emerging in the chaos of that color. Just right there. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me that the healing of Jesus Christ in these stations come from the chaos. That the chaos is part of the story. In fact, the chaos is the main character in the story. Holy moly. The insight was overwhelming to me. The chaos was a main character in the story. If you look at the Stations of the Cross and the issues of sexual abuse and violence, both of which, those stories, we want to cover over the chaos so it's not too overwhelming. The Stations of the Cross in a church are about the death of Jesus. And we want to make sure that they're clean and tidy so that they're not offensive to anybody. What? It's about the death of a man and ultimately our Savior, right? So the chaos became, for me, all of a sudden, a main character. But all of a sudden, here were these eyes of Jesus that were emerging from the chaos. In other words, he was in it. he was in the chaos, and all I needed to do was to tease out the image of Jesus to get at what he needed to be and say in any one of these particular stations. So the first one, if you look at the first station, which is on page 4. Now, the interesting thing is, when you look at that, is that the face of Jesus I would have painted had I not been, if I'd been trying to control it? No. But this is the face that emerged. So I just went with it. And so when you look at it, the eyes behind Jesus to the left there are the disciples who could not stay awake. But those eyes also represent the abuser who is constantly behind in the shadows and in the darkness, right? And of course, at night, on Holy Thursday night, in the garden, the light shines in a moon back there, reflecting on his face a little bit, but also you can see the image of the disciples and the abuser. Now, what Jesus is offering here is the cup of salvation, that in that text, he wants to hand us that gift. My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. So the cup there represents, of course, what had just happened in the gathering of the Last Supper, but it also represents the suffering that is to come. That cup of suffering is not just for him, but it's also for us. So the cup is right there on the edge of the painting for us to get a hold of and grab and take for our own. Then there is a handprint there as well. After doing the first couple of these, I realized that the children needed to be in the painting more. And so I put a handprint in each one, at least one handprint, to represent the child. Now, what I immediately realized is that it's not the child that needed to be represented. It's the child within all of us as adults that also need to be part of the story. So here, with Jesus in the garden, that the child in us also begin this story. Reluctantly, but the child is there. The child that has been abused, but it's also the adult in whose childlike stance and posture toward this healing is present. Does that make sense? So, off I went. If we look at the back, on the inside cover of the back cover, it has where it says the artist's response. So it's the inside of the back cover. Okay, it says the artist's response. If we look at that first sentence that I wrote, it says about finger painting. This is a summation of my whole posture in this project. I pray that my fingers covered in paint may help redeem the abuse our children faced at the hands of my brothers. I pray that my fingers covered in paint may help redeem the abuse our children faced at the hands of my brothers. That for me was ground zero of what I was trying to do. So I also began to write this response as I went along. The backdrop of chaos, here realizing that the chaos was part of the story. With my fingers, brushes, and rags, I splashed paint on the canvas. From that chaos, Jesus emerged. The sex crimes of clergy will never fade or go away. Healing must allow the chaos to speak. The disorder cannot be blended away or ignored or painted over. The disarray becomes the consistent motif for all 14 stations. I cannot control the chaos of abuse. I also could not control how the face of Jesus revealed itself from the canvas of such discontinuity, disorder, and madness. That's quite a paragraph, isn't it? But the chaos becomes part of the story. Also, just the notion of everything being outside the lines. I pray that my paintings with blurred lines may help heal the ways my brother priests blurred lines of appropriate boundaries. They destroyed children's innocence, and that destruction continues within adulthood. I want people to see themselves here in the mess, the mix of colors, and the unfinished nature of the characters. I want people to see Jesus' emotion for them. The primary colors, our children use primary colors to create art. I want to experience the innocence of raw color and their instincts of applying paint on canvas. These images are not adorned with clean lines, nuance, or historical style. Viewing the colors and styles of children enable us all to heal. The face of Christ. The face of Christ holds every emotion of abuse and of our untold stories. He receives all we offer him. Jesus, in turn, reveals to us both suffering and mercy. In his eyes, we find home. So you can read the rest of that. But also, in the course of this, just quickly, on page 16, it's the seventh station. It's interesting here that how things began to emerge for me in ways in which I least expected. You know, when Jesus bears his cross, it never occurred to me that the bearing of the cross and the weight of the cross was the beginning of our baptism. It's the beginning of us being submerged in the gift of the waters of baptism, bearing our cross. The heaviness is the drowning. In other words, it's the drowning. Now, did I ever think that in my entire life? No, I never did. Until all of a sudden it emerged in this painting. I didn't. It just emerged that way. So the Jesus bears his cross looks like a drowning. I did not plan that. And then, of course, the handprint suggesting, too, that all of us will join him. If we look at station 13 on page 28, here in this one, so Jesus dies on the cross. In the painting, Jesus does not have hands. And yet the hands of Jesus are all of us and all the children who continue on, who support him and live in him. So it's the community of people who are his hands, right? Now, if you look in the center of that picture in his chest, you'll see there's an image there of the cross. Now, I did not paint that. I didn't paint it. It was just there. It just emerged. Honest to God, I did not paint that. It emerged in the chaos. And after I began to work with that a little bit, all of a sudden, there it was in his chest, suggesting that the cross is not something external. The cross is something internal. And it's the ways in which we live our lives and the ways in which we surrender to God, right? So, honest to God, I did not paint that. It just emerged. So, I will leave this for you, and I hope that sometime as a community you can pray it. But there's more to the story. So after I finished this, and of course, I started painting this about a week before the shutdown. Well, after the shutdown in March, right, at our Colorado Springs, it was March 13th. After that, boy, I had all kinds of time. So it was due in August of 2020. I got it done by May 1st of 2020. And I was just really into it. So when I finished it, and I was praying with it, and all of that, I realized for the very first time in my life that I named it, that I had been abused too. I never put that label on it. And it was an emotional abuse from these two clergy while I was in high school. I never put that label on it until I did the paintings. It was working through the paintings that I discovered that in myself. So I had to work with that a lot, and that was my real COVID project. It wasn't, as it turned out, it wasn't the art that was my COVID project. It was the reality of what the art brought out in me. But I had never put that label on it, never. In fact, I had never even told anybody about it. That was quite a piece during COVID. So then, the following spring, in May of 2021, I had my first professional art show in Colorado Springs. The originals of these, a couple in the parish had them framed, and we did this incredible exhibit in this art gallery in downtown Colorado Springs. And I had over 900 people view them. And again, that was just coming out of COVID a little bit. So on the Feast of Pentecost on 2021, I gave a talk about them, and I invited the editor to come from Minnesota. And it was an amazing experience. and I had 900 people overall saw them. And at that talk on that Sunday afternoon, I had 300 people from the parish who came to listen. It was just an incredible gift to me. So the interesting thing since then is that there are very few communities who want to take this on as prayer. It's astonishing. You would think that the church at its heart would invest itself right in the center of prayer, praying for the children who have been abused. Not so. Very few people want to take that on. Liturgical press, the problem was too COVID. So liturgical press normally would have taken this all over the country to big conferences and things like that. And then in the end, when COVID was over, the conferences didn't want them either. So I still think the issue is still here. The issue is still not dealt with. We need more than ever communities of believers to pray through these issues. These are not the traditional stations, they're John Paul's scriptural stations. And there is one line in each of the stations from an abused person. So Paul Turner, when he wrote the text, got a group of adults who had been abused, and they offered him the lines to put in the text. So those lines actually did come from the experience of somebody who had been abused. So the Sisters of the Poor Handmaids of Jesus Christ in Donaldson, Indiana, have my originals right now, and I know that they are praying with them this Lenten season. So I would just encourage you to sit with these, look at them. You know, when the editor approved, when I handed these images in, you can tell I can talk about this for a long time. When I sent the images in, I still did not think that the editor would use them because they're so drastically different from the norm. So then the editor had to take them to Paul Turner and say, you know, these are the images we have for your text. And at first he was kind of surprised, but then the more he sat with them and my written response in the back, the more he sat with that, the more he really, really appreciated them. So here they are. I entrust them to you. And I invite you sometime on your own or together, and maybe even before Easter, you might spend some time alone with them, look through them, walk through them, pray through them, and just remember the children. Any questions, thoughts? I know I'm way over time, but any thoughts, questions? You can tell me this afternoon too, if you want. All right? God give you peace. Thank you.